Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Stellar Dawn and watched the black void of space through the main viewport. His crew had been exploring the outer regions for 3 months, scanning planets and collecting data about space phenomena. The work was routine and boring. Marcus was a tall man with dark hair and calm eyes. He had been a captain for 7 years and had seen many things in deep space, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. The sensors lit up suddenly. A massive ship appeared on the scanners, moving toward them at a steady pace. The ship was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. Its hull was smooth and curved, with sharp edges that caught the light in odd ways. Strange symbols covered its surface in patterns that seemed to shift and change. Dr. Linda Hayes, the science officer, looked up from her station with wide eyes. Her voice was steady but carried a note of surprise. She said, "Captain, that ship is more than twice the size of ours. Our scanners show it is heavily armed. Multiple weapon systems. Should we move to defensive positions?" Marcus considered this for a moment. He had learned long ago that fear often led to mistakes. He made a decision that would change everything. He said, "No, open a communication channel. Let's see who they are. Maybe they want to talk." The crew looked at him with doubt, but they followed his orders. Linda worked at her station and opened the channel. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, deep and strange, with sounds that no human voice box could make. The ship's computer translated the words into English. The voice said, "I am Queen Vixtara of the Zidara Empire. Your ship has entered our territory. Identify yourself or be destroyed." Marcus took a deep breath and spoke into the communicator. He said, "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the human exploration vessel Stellar Dawn. We mean no harm. We were simply mapping this region of space. We did not know this was your territory. We come in peace." There was silence for a long moment. Then the voice returned. It said, "You will dock with our flagship. You will meet with me face to face. If you try anything, your ship will be torn apart." Marcus looked at his crew. Everyone seemed scared, but he was calm. He said, "Dock us with their vessel, carefully, and get me dressed in formal attire. We are about to make first contact with a new species." The docking process took careful work. The Stellar Dawn moved slowly toward the massive alien vessel. Magnetic clamps locked the two ships together. Marcus put on his dress uniform, a dark blue with gold trim. He checked himself in the mirror. Then he walked toward the docking bay, followed by 2 security officers. The airlock opened, and Marcus stepped into the Zidara ship. The first thing he noticed was the smell. It was like ozone and something chemical. Not pleasant, but not terrible. The second thing he noticed was the guards. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with hard exoskeletons that were dark gray and covered in ridges. They had multiple eyes that blinked in sequence. They carried weapons that looked more like tools of torture than guns. One of the guards gestured down a corridor. Marcus and his team walked forward. The ship's corridors were vast and built for large creatures. The walls were smooth and seemed to pulse with a faint light. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's standard, which made Marcus feel weighted down. They arrived at a throne room of sorts. It was a vast chamber with a high ceiling. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat the Queen. Marcus had to force himself not to react. Queen Vixtara was like nothing he had ever seen. Her body was covered in a hard carapace that was deep purple with streaks of blue and green. Her skin was not skin at all, but a natural armor. Her face was not a face in the human sense. She had 6 eyes arranged in a circle, each one large and multifaceted like an insect's eye. Below the eyes were 2 sharp mandibles that curved inward. Her body was broad and powerful, with limbs that seemed to move with an alien grace. She was strange. She was alien. She was, by any standard Marcus had ever known, ugly. But Marcus was a man who thought carefully before he acted. He walked forward and bowed with respect. Then he looked up at the Queen and smiled. He said, "Your Majesty, I am Captain Marcus Webb of humanity. I must tell you the truth. You are gorgeous." The entire throne room went silent. The guards shifted. The Queen's mandibles moved in what might have been surprise. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the Queen rose to her full height. She was massive, at least 9 feet tall. Her voice came through the translator. She said, "What did you call me?" Marcus stood his ground. He said, "Gorgeous, Your Majesty. The patterns on your carapace are beautiful. They shift and change with an intelligence that shows your mind is as complex as your body is powerful. Your eyes hold wisdom and strength. You are magnificent." The Queen moved closer to Marcus. He could see the individual scales on her armor, each one a shade of purple that seemed to contain light itself. He could see the way her eyes focused on him, the way all 6 turned toward him at once. He did not back away. She said, "I am not gorgeous. I am Zidara. The rest of the galaxy calls me a monster. They see my face and turn away. They see my body and feel disgust. Humans in Krell and Vendi and all the others think I'm ugly. Why would you lie to me?" Marcus looked her directly in all 6 eyes. He said, "I am not lying, Your Majesty. I see a being of strength and power. I see someone who rules an empire and makes decisions that matter. I see someone whose mind is sharp and whose presence fills this room. That is what I call gorgeous. That is the truth." The Queen was silent for a long time. Then something remarkable happened. One of her mandibles curved upward in what might have been a smile. She said, "You are either very brave or very foolish, Captain Marcus Webb. Either way, I like you. We will talk. We will learn about each other. Perhaps humanity is different from the other species. Perhaps you see things the rest of the galaxy misses." And that was how the alliance began. Not through fear or force. Not through treaties or weapons. It began because one human man looked at an alien queen and saw beauty where the entire galaxy saw only ugliness. It began because he had the courage to speak that truth out loud. The throne room of the Zidara Empire buzzed with tension. News of Captain Marcus Webb's words to Queen Vixtara had spread through the entire court like wildfire. Some Zidara were pleased. Others were angry. The guards and advisors who had watched the encounter debated endlessly about what the human captain meant. Commander Kale was one of those who doubted. He was a jeweler, a warrior, massive and scarred from 100 battles. His carapace was darker than most, almost black, with deep cracks running through it from old injuries. He stood in the war room with other military leaders and spoke with harsh certainty. He said, "This is a trick. Humans are cunning. They want something from us. They want our technology. They want our strength. This human calls our queen gorgeous to make her weak, to make her trust him. Then he will ask for our secrets, or worse, he will betray us to our enemies." But Queen Vixtara had ordered that Ambassador Victoria Cross of Humanity be brought to the Zidara capital. Victoria was different from Marcus. She was smaller, lighter, and she moved with a careful grace. She wore the dress uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps, which was even more formal than Marcus's military uniform. She had red hair tied back tightly and sharp blue eyes that observed everything. Victoria spent days learning about Zidara culture. She studied their history, their art, their wars and victories. She met with historians and philosophers. She walked through the great libraries of the Zidara people and read their records. What she discovered shocked her deeply. One evening, Queen Vixtara asked Victoria to join her in her private chamber. The room was vast, with windows that looked out at the endless stars. The queen seemed tired. Her normally bright bioluminescent patterns were dim. She looked at Victoria with her 6 eyes and said something that would change everything. She said, "Tell me the truth, Ambassador. When you look at me, do you see an ugly creature? Be honest with me. I have heard it my entire life. Every diplomat from every species has looked at me with disgust. Most of them request to negotiate through electronic devices instead of facing me in person. My own advisors believe I should hide myself away and let a more attractive member of my species handle diplomatic missions. Is that what humans think too?" Victoria felt a deep sadness wash over her. She moved closer to the queen and sat down on a bench. She said, "Your Majesty, yes, by some standards, your appearance is different from many species. But different does not mean ugly. I have learned a lot in my time here. I have read your history. I know that your people have been told for thousands of years that you are inferior, that your appearance makes you less worthy of respect. That is not truth. That is poisoning." The queen's mandibles moved. Victoria understood now that this was a sign of emotion, usually surprise or interest. The queen said, "What do you mean by this poisoning?" Victoria stood and began to walk around the chamber as she spoke. She said, "My people, humans, have done the same thing. We have judged others by how they look. We created lies about people with different skin colors. We told ourselves that people who looked different were dangerous or stupid or evil. We were wrong. It took us centuries to learn that beauty and worth have nothing to do with appearance. We learned it the hard way, by fighting wars and causing suffering. But we finally learned." She turned back to face the queen. She said, "The Jithara did not choose to look like this. You evolved this way on your world. Your hard carapace protected you from your harsh environment. Your multiple eyes let you see threats from every direction. Your strength in your mind allowed you to build an empire. These are not marks of ugliness. These are marks of survival and intelligence." Victoria sat back down and said, "Let me tell you about my grandmother. In my time, there were humans who had ancestors from Africa. The history books tell us that our people were treated as less than human because of the color of their skin. They were enslaved. They were beaten. They were told they were ugly. Today, no reasonable human would think that. We understand now that it was all based on fear and ignorance. The same ignorance that makes your own people think you are ugly is the ignorance that taught my ancestors to hate each other." Queen Vixtara was silent for a long time. She looked out at the stars. Then she spoke softly. She said, "So you are saying that I've been told a lie my entire life? That the Jithara people have been told a lie? That our appearance does not make us inferior or ugly? That we have been damaged by the words and beliefs of others?" Victoria said, "Yes, that is exactly what I am saying." The queen turned her eyes to look at Victoria. She said, "I have ruled this empire for 15 years. I have made decisions that affected billions of lives. I have led my people through wars and times of peace. I have been a good leader, but I have never believed it. Deep inside, I have always thought that someone more beautiful, someone more like the Vendi or the Crow, would be a better queen. I have never trusted my own worth." Victoria reached out and placed her hand on the queen's hard arm. She said, "That ends now. You are worthy. Your appearance is not ugly. The galaxy that has made you feel this way is wrong. And there are humans like Captain Marcus who see the truth. You are gorgeous because you are strong, intelligent, and kind to your people. That is what matters." For the first time in her life, Queen Vixtara understood something fundamental. The ugliness she saw when she looked at herself was not real. It was a reflection of the hatred and fear that other species had taught her to feel. It was time to reject that hatred. She looked at Victoria and said, "Will you help me teach my people this truth? Will you help me teach the galaxy?" Victoria smiled. She said, "That is why Captain Marcus and I are here, Your Majesty. We see you clearly, and we will help the entire galaxy learn to see as well." From that moment, something shifted in the Zithara Empire. The Queen began to speak differently about herself and her people. She told her advisors that she was proud of the Zithara appearance. She removed all the dark coverings from the palace windows so that her people could see her in full light. She commanded that all historians must rewrite the records that said the Zithara were ugly. Commander Kale watched these changes with growing anger, but he said nothing. Not yet. He knew that one human captain and one human ambassador could not change thousands of years of shame. He was certain that something darker was at work, and he was waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. The Galactic Council chambers were filled with fear and confusion. Representatives from a dozen species sat in a circular arrangement, facing each other across vast distances. The Krell delegate spoke first. He was a tall creature made of crystal that shifted colors with each emotion. His voice was like wind chiming through glass. He said, "We have lost contact with 7 colonies on the outer rim. Completely lost. No distress signals. No responses to communications. Their entire populations are simply gone. We sent a scout ship to investigate one of them. The ship transmitted one message before losing contact. It said only, 'They are here. We are gone.'" The Vendi representative, a small furry creature with multiple limbs, stood up in agitation. She said, "This is worse than we thought. The Void Collective is not just taking resources. They are consuming entire worlds. And they are consuming them faster." Dr. Emil Harrison, the human representative to the Galactic Council, listened carefully. He was an older man with gray hair and intelligent eyes. He had been following reports of the Void Collective for 6 months. He knew this was serious. The Void Collective was not like any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. It was not an empire or an army. It was a hive mind. It was a parasitic consciousness that consumed biological matter and technology alike. When it took over a world, nothing remained. No buildings, no people, no resources. Everything was absorbed into the expanding mass of the collective. And it was growing. It was moving inward, toward the core worlds. A voice came through the communication system. It was Queen Vixtara, connecting from her throne room on the Zithara homeworld. She said, "The Void Collective is a threat to all of us. We must unite. We must put aside our differences and fight together. Only together can we stop it." There was silence. Then the Krell delegate said something that would echo through the council for days to come. He said, "We will fight this threat, but we will not fight alongside the Zithara." The crystal creature's colors shifted to a deep red. He continued, "The Zithara are monsters. Their appearance alone is enough to show that they are wrong, that they are corrupted. How can we trust them in a war? How can we be certain they are not already infiltrated by the collective? We propose that the Zithara be quarantined until this crisis is over." The Vendi delegate agreed. The Jenner representative, a being of pure energy contained in a magnetic field, also voted to quarantine the Zithara. One by one, species after species chose isolation over cooperation. Even some of the smaller human colonies voted with the majority, but the human council members did not. Dr. Harrison stood and said, "Humanity stands with the Zithara. We have worked with them. We know their character. This vote is based on prejudice, not logic." The council chamber erupted in argument. But the damage was done. News of the vote spread through the galactic networks faster than light communications could travel. Within hours, every species in known space knew that the Zithara had been rejected by the Galactic Council. They knew that humanity had chosen to stand alone with the Zithara. Some human worlds were not pleased with this decision. On the colony world of New Boston, riots broke out in the streets. Humans shouted that they should not be aligned with the Zithara. They said that by choosing to stand with the aliens, humanity was choosing to stand against the rest of civilization. On a military station called Fort Russell, soldiers refused orders. They said they would not fight alongside creatures that looked like monsters. The officers had to lock them in holding areas. More troubling still, propaganda machines across the galaxy began spreading lies about the alliance between humans and Zithara. Some said that humans had been compromised, that they had been infected by some Zithara mind control weapon. Others claimed that the Zithara had threatened Earth and forced humans to become their slaves. The false stories spread faster than the truth could travel. Queen Vixtara received all of this information in her throne room. She watched the news reports. She read the statements from other species. She saw the rejection written across the galaxy, and she felt something break inside her. She called for Marcus and Victoria to come to her private chamber. When they arrived, the Queen's bioluminescent patterns were nearly dark. She said, "It seems that your words were only tricks after all. Captain, the galaxy hates us. Your own people are abandoning you because of us. This was all a game. Let me withdraw the Zithara from this alliance before it destroys both our peoples." Marcus was shocked. He said, "Your Majesty, no. What is happening right now is exactly what I warned you about. The fear and prejudice are fighting back. This is not failure. This is the moment that tests whether our alliance is real." But Victoria could see that the Queen was already retreating into the darkness of self-doubt. She said, "Tell me, Captain. Tell me why I should believe you. Your own people are rejecting you for standing with me. Why would you do this unless you are lying?" Marcus took a breath. He looked at the Queen directly and said, "Because some humans are brave, Your Majesty, and some humans see the truth. We know that you are not a monster. We know that you are a great leader, and we will stand with you even when it costs us everything." Commander Kale entered the chamber without permission. His scarred face was hard. He said, "The captain is lying, Your Majesty. The humans have used us. Now we must go to war against an impossible enemy, alone and weakened. We should cut ties with them immediately." The Queen looked between the commander and the captain. She was trapped between hope and despair. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly. She said, "I do not know who to trust anymore." It was at that moment that Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He opened communications to every human military base, every human political leader, and every human colony. He recorded a message that would be broadcast across all human space. He said, "I am Captain Marcus Webb. I stand with Queen Vixtara and the Zithar people. I reject the prejudice that has poisoned our galaxy for too long. I reject the fear that makes us see beauty as ugliness. If you are human and you hear this, know that humanity is capable of better. We are capable of seeing beyond appearances. We are capable of choosing justice over fear. I ask you to stand with me. I ask you to stand with the Zithara. And I ask you to stand against the darkness that the Void Collective brings." The message spread through human space like fire. Young people began to protest the lies. Military leaders who had honored integrity began to question the orders to abandon the Zithara. Slowly, a movement began. Not all humans changed their minds, but enough did to matter. And in her throne room, Queen Vixtara saw this and felt something shift inside her. She turned to Marcus and said, "You did not lie to me. You will stand with my people, even when it is hard." The Queen made her decision. The Zithara would prepare for war. They would fight the Void Collective, and they would do it alongside humanity. The alliance would be tested in the fires of battle, but it would hold. The battle was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The Void Collective attacked with waves of ships that looked more like living creatures than machines. They were organic and metal mixed together in shapes that hurt to look at. They moved through space with a terrible purpose, consuming everything in their path. The Zidara flagship, called the Throne of Purple Might, moved through the chaos of battle. Queen Vixtara stood on her bridge, watching her people fight and die to protect their existence. The queen was a warrior as well as a ruler. She made split-second decisions that saved lives. She ordered defensive maneuvers that kept her ship moving just fast enough to avoid enemy fire. But the enemy was everywhere, and they were learning. For every tactic the Zidar tried, the Void Collective seemed to develop a counter. Their hive mind worked as one. They did not make mistakes. They did not doubt. They did not feel fear. They only consumed. A massive enemy carrier ship approached the Throne of Purple Might. It was the size of a small moon. Its front end was a gaping mouth lined with weapons. It moved straight toward the Queen's vessel with terrible speed. Alarms screamed across the bridge. The science officer, a Zidara female named Kextra, shouted that impact was unavoidable. The shields would not hold. The armor would crack. The ship would be torn open. Then Captain Marcus Webb appeared on the communication screen from the stellar dawn. He did not ask permission. He did not wait for orders. He simply said, "I am coming to you." Before anyone could respond, Marcus ejected from the stellar dawn in a small fighter craft. It was fast and fragile, built for speed rather than protection. He flew directly into the collision zone between the two massive ships. He pushed the fighter to its limits. The Void Collective fire reached out for him, but he twisted and turned, using human intuition and quick reactions to survive impossible odds. His fighter crashed into the side of the Throne of Purple Might. The impact was violent but controlled. Marcus had done this maneuver in training hundreds of times. He had never done it in real combat. He could have died. The fighter was smoking, barely functional. But he was alive. Security teams rushed to the docking bay and pulled Marcus from the burning cockpit. He was burned on his right arm and his leg was bleeding. But his mind was clear. He looked at the officer in charge and said, "Take me to the Queen. The ship is failing. I can help fix it." The officer wanted to take him to the medical bay, but Marcus refused. Time was running out. He ran through the corridors of the Zidara ship, following the path he had studied in detail during his time aboard. Behind him, the security team tried to keep pace. He found Queen Vixtara on the bridge. She was pinned under a massive piece of fallen machinery. Her armor was cracked. She had blood on her carapace. But her eyes were still sharp, still alert. She was still fighting, even as her ship was dying around her. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. He said, "I am here." The Queen looked at him with all six of her eyes. She said, "You came back." Marcus did not waste words on sentiment. He began pushing at the machinery that trapped her. But it was too heavy. He could not move it alone. The Queen pushed from her side, using her tremendous strength. Together, with human ingenuity and Zidara power, they lifted the wreckage. The Queen stood, limping slightly. Together, they ran to the engine room. The entire ship was shaking. Explosions lit the corridors like lightning. They could hear the massive carrier ship crashing into their hull. The sound was deafening, like the world was splitting apart. In the engine room, the main systems were damaged. The reactor was offline. The weapons could not fire. The Queen understood the problem immediately. She knew her ship, but she did not know how to fix the systems the way the weapons officer was designed to fix them. Marcus looked at the controls. His experience with human ships was different, but the principles were the same. Power, direction, focus. He said, "I need help." Show me what this does. Then show me how to bypass this section. For the next minute, Queen Vixtara and Captain Marcus Webb worked as one unit. She used her strength to reroute power conduits. He used his knowledge of systems to redirect the flow of energy. They did not speak. They did not have time. They moved together, understanding each other's movements without words. The reactor came online. The ship shuddered, but it was alive again. The weapon systems powered up. On the bridge, Kextra saw the power and immediately fired the main weapons. The massive cannon of the Throne of Purple might lit up space with blue fire. The blast struck the Void Collective carrier directly. The collision was catastrophic. The enemy ship was torn apart. It exploded in a wave of destruction that lit up the entire battle zone. For the first time, the Void Collective had suffered a real defeat. The remaining enemy ships hesitated. Their hive mind was disrupted by the loss of such a massive unit. It took them time to reorganize. In that moment, the human and Zidara fleets rallied. They struck with coordinated attacks that the Void Collective was not prepared for. The enemy withdrew, pulling back to regroup and adapt. The battle was over. The Zidara and humans had won. Marcus and Queen Vixtara emerged from the engine room covered in soot and blood. The Queen's crew burst into celebration when they saw her. The warriors who had been prepared to die now cheered for life. They gathered around their queen, and they also gathered around Captain Marcus Webb. The crew did not care that he was human and they were Zidara. They cared that he had flown into the heart of battle to save their queen. They cared that he had worked alongside her, human and alien together, to save their ship. They cared that he had seen their queen as beautiful when the rest of the galaxy saw her as ugly. That evening, Marcus and Vixtara stood on the observation deck of her ship. They looked out at the wreckage of the battle floating in space. The Queen said, "You called me gorgeous when you first met me. I told you that I was ugly. Do you remember?" Marcus said, "I remember." The Queen said, "I finally understand what you meant. You were not talking about how I look. You were talking about who I am. My strength. My courage. My willingness to protect my people. That is what makes someone gorgeous. And you showed me the same thing in this battle. You put yourself in danger for me. For us. That is what beauty really is." Marcus looked at the Queen and smiled. He said, "Now you see the truth. And you see how it looks when two different species work together. That is the future, Your Majesty. That is what we can build together." The Queen placed her large hand on Marcus's shoulder. She said, "Then let us build it. Together." 1 year after the Battle of Kepler Station, the construction was finally complete. The Harmony Center stood on the neutral world of Celestis Prime, a building designed by both human and Zidara architects. It was beautiful in a way that showed the blend of two different aesthetics. The sharp angles of Zidara design merged with the curved lines of human architecture. It was a physical representation of what cooperation could create. Queen Vixtara stood in the main chamber, watching workers make final adjustments. The humans who had once rejected her were now some of her strongest supporters. The propaganda and lies had slowly faded away, replaced by the truth. Humans and Zidara had fought together against the Void Collective. They had bled together. They had saved each other. That simple fact was more powerful than any political argument could be. The opening ceremony of the Harmony Center was attended by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The Krell came, still uncertain but willing to learn. The Vendi brought their historians. The Jenners sent their greatest philosophers. Even some of the human colonies that had once rejected the Zidara sent delegates. Victoria Cross stood beside Queen Vixtara as the ceremony began. Victoria had been promoted to Director of Cultural Exchange for all human Zidara relations. She said, "Your Majesty, look at them. A year ago, they would not share a room with you. Now they come to see what you and humanity are building." The queen said, "It is still fragile. Some still believe the lies. Some still see me as ugly." Victoria smiled. She said, "Perhaps. But they are here. And every time they look at you and what you have accomplished, they see something different. They see a being who is brilliant and strong and worthy of respect." That is how change begins. The ceremony opened with speeches. Marcus Webb spoke first. He stood before the gathered species and told the story of his first meeting with Queen Vixtara. He spoke plainly and honestly about how he had called her gorgeous and how she had rejected the compliment. He spoke about learning that beauty is not about appearance, but about character. He said, "I ask every being in this room to look at each other with new eyes. See past the differences in how we look. See past the fears that have been taught to us. See the strength in each other. See the intelligence. See the potential. That is when real progress becomes possible. That is when we can build something that serves all species, not just the ones who look like each other." When Marcus finished, the chamber was quiet. Then Queen Vixtara stood. She walked to where Marcus stood and placed her hand on his shoulder in the gesture of respect that had become familiar across the galaxy. She spoke to the assembled representatives. She said, "I have been told my entire life that I am ugly. My own people believed it. The rest of the galaxy reinforced it every time they looked at me with disgust or fear. I carried that shame. I believed it was true. But Captain Marcus Webb helped me understand something fundamental. Beauty has nothing to do with how your body looks. Beauty comes from how you live, how you lead, how you treat others. I was not ugly. I was poisoned by the words and beliefs of others. This center is dedicated to healing that poison. It is dedicated to teaching the galaxy that every being has worth. Every being has something to offer." Over the following months, the Harmony Center became the most important place in galactic civilization. Scholars came to study. Young people came to learn about other species. Scientists came to collaborate on new technologies. Artists came to share their perspectives. Musicians from different species played together, creating sounds that had never been heard before. The Crow brought their crystal architecture knowledge. The Zithara shared their deep understanding of planetary adaptation. Humans brought their skill at connecting seemingly unrelated ideas. The Vendi contributed their knowledge of healing practices. Working together, they began to solve problems that no single species could have solved alone. Not everyone was pleased with these changes. Commander Kale watched with growing fury as the alliance between humans and Zithara deepened. He gathered followers who still believed that the Zithara should be isolated, that the Queen had been manipulated, that the alliance was a mistake. But even Kale had to admit that the alliance was working. The Void Collective was being pushed back. Worlds that had been lost were being reclaimed. Life was spreading instead of being consumed. One day, Kale requested a private meeting with the Queen. He came to her chamber, and for 3 hours, they spoke. When Kale left, he was different. He did not speak about his doubts anymore. When asked what had changed his mind, he would only say that the Queen had shown him the future, and it was one worth fighting for. Years passed. The Harmony Center expanded. Smaller centers were built on dozens of worlds. The Galactic Council was reorganized to include equal representation from every species, not just the strongest or most feared. Trade increased. Knowledge was shared freely. Weapons that had been built for war were redesigned for construction and healing. Marcus retired from active military duty and took a position as chief liaison to the Jithara Empire. When offered promotions to higher positions on Earth and on human worlds, he always declined. He wanted to stay, to see what humanity and Zithara could build together. One evening, Marcus and Queen Vixtara stood on a balcony overlooking the Harmony Center. The building was lit from within, glowing with warm light. Thousands of beings from 100 species were working inside, learning from each other, creating together. The Queen said, "I used to think that being called gorgeous was an insult. I was certain I was ugly. I spent my life believing I was less than other beings, simply because I looked different. But you helped me understand something that changed everything." Marcus smiled. He said, "What was that, Your Majesty?" The Queen said, "You were never complimenting my appearance. You were naming the beauty you saw in my character, my mind, and my spirit. You saw me clearly, and you made me want to see myself the same way. That is a gift that I can never repay." Marcus looked at the Queen, at her purple carapace that seemed to catch the light and throw it back transformed, at her 6 eyes that shone with intelligence and compassion. He said, "And that moment when I first saw you smile, when your mandibles curved in that expression of joy, that was the most gorgeous thing I have ever seen in all my travels through the stars. That smile changed me. It changed the future." The Queen and the Captain stood together in silence, watching the lights of the Harmony Center glow in the darkness of space. Somewhere in that building, young Zadar were teaching young humans about their culture. Young Krell were working alongside young Vendi to solve equations that neither species could have solved alone. Young humans were learning to see beauty in the most unexpected places. The galaxy was changing. It was slow. There was still prejudice. There were still beings who clung to old ideas of who was beautiful and who was ugly. But the seed had been planted. The seed was growing. And in the heart of that transformation stood a queen who had learned that she was beautiful all along, and a captain who had seen the truth and had the courage to speak it. The war against the Void Collective continued. But it was no longer a war of species fighting alone. It was a war of a united galaxy, standing together, seeing each other clearly. And that made all the difference. That meant victory was not just possible. It meant victory was inevitable. And on that balcony, under the stars of a transformed galaxy, a human and a Zadar queen looked toward the future and smiled.